Drew Brees is out, but for how long and now what in terms of a ton of fantasy value for this year, Dynasty as well. Drew Brees beyond 2020 is a fascinating discussion, but also over the next few weeks, he's getting a second opinion. And frankly, we need a second opinion for Dynasty as well. Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I am Chad Parsons, joined by Jordan McNamara, episode 29. We are still on the air, Jordan. We are firing away, and it's a sad week. There's some trade deadlines closing, but let's talk about Drew Brees. Let's talk about Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, and we could see all three of those players in some semblance in fantasy lineups over the next 6 weeks in the crunch time for Dynasty leagues.
Yeah, this is a really unique situation where we're getting a high value quarterback coming in at this point, and with Jameis Winston, and it's going to be a really interesting situation down the stretch. I don't know about you. I'm not sure what this offense is going to look like, whether it's this week, whether it's over the next couple weeks with Brees. If I read it right, and I don't know if you saw it any different, but if I read it right and understood it right, this was actually a 2-week thing, right? Like, he suffered this injury over a couple of weeks. So that's pretty interesting there in terms of that, being causation. But I mean, Atlanta, they get Denver coming up here too as well. So, and then Atlanta again. So, I mean, if Jameis is going to get some run here, this is going to be a really interesting monkey wrench into teams that stashed him and teams that had Brees and were relying on Brees coming in.
Yes. I think especially Drew Brees in Superflex, because it is potentially more difficult to fix. It is one of the bigger decision-making vehicles for this coming week. And the real linchpin is going to be, do you even have clarity on how long he will be out by Wednesday night or Thursday, first waiver run of the week in your leagues? Will you have clarity on? Because if you're a team, and I think this is really a three-pronged discussion, if you're not contending, you don't really care. There's not a big thing here. If you're contending for a playoff spot, you care deeply. If you are close enough, maybe if you're cruising to a bye, you may just sit and be fine and say, I just need to win like 1 out of 3 weeks, and I might still be in the exact, or if you're kind of locked in 3 through 6 or something, or 3, 4, and you're not really very close to the next tier jump to week 14, you're not playing, then again, if you're kind of locked in, I don't think there's much to do here. But if you're in a situation where there's upward or downward mobility, and you don't really Superflex, you don't really have pivots a lot of times. So, and especially here, Winston is not a pivot. Taysom Hill would have to be one of the most shallow Superflex dynasty leagues ever. I mean, I'm almost thinking he would be available in FFPC Superflex kind of depth. But otherwise, no, because you can't have backups pretty much at all. Jameis Winston, you probably did have in that depth, even though. But so I really think you have to address that with, because if he's going to be back for your next meaningful game in week 14, let's say, but I don't think right now you can have certainty of that. The getting a second opinion, I don't know what and again, you're our legal correspondent, not so much the medical correspondent, but when I hear seek a second opinion, it probably means the first opinion. I mean, it means it's either a big enough deal. It could have Gene Bramwell on for a little spot phone call right now, but it could be number one, you have either it's a big enough deal that you want to make sure everybody is on the same page, or so it's a big deal in that case. The other one is the first piece of news was bad enough that you go, well, I want to hear something better. So it's either one of those two things is my first gut reaction. Do you have a different one, or do you have of those two, this is what I generally think of in this setting?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different avenues you could go, and that was, just to pivot to a different story that kind of I read the same way in terms of, geez, that does not sound good. The way the words were was McCaffrey. And McCaffrey, the initial test, and he's getting a second opinion, and it's just the way the words were coming out, and maybe I was just being overly
invested in Mike Davis.
Or just overly picking apart the sentence, but it just read really weird to me in terms of what about how they were phrasing it, and people like Ian Rappaport and how they were talking about it. It just gave me a lot of pause with McCaffrey. So he's one of those where, hey, seeking a second opinion and you don't feel quite as good about it. I mean, I'll just say with the multiple injuries and sort of and we saw Tyrod Taylor with the collapsed lung earlier in the season, and what that did for him. I'm not gonna sit here and compare those, but I mean, that can't be great.
I will say Tyrod.
At least it doesn't look like Breeze was hospitalized. So that's, I guess, a good thing. But yeah, I mean, and then the question's going to be right, especially in Superflex, and that's really where I was taking this conversation. I was thinking about this conversation when we started it. Is all right. You're sort of going down the stretch. How good do you feel about Jameis right now? And then if Breeze is out for a period of time, what's the odds? I mean, take best case scenario, right? Take best case scenario in terms of Jameis Winston, right? Give Jameis as good as he can go for, I don't know, let's call it 2 or 3 games. And the Saints win those games and are on track for a 1 seed. What's the possibility that Breeze doesn't get his job back? Like, best case scenario for Winston.
Well, didn't Bridgewater go 5-0 last year?
That's true.
So that was best case, right? And so that was a little earlier in the season, if memory serves, for the games he missed. But definitely a 5-0 stretch helps every team improve their standing. So I would say this, though. I mean, we were kind of talking before air that, their future is murky at best when you look at salary cap conditions and standards for 2021 plus. So, and that's beyond Drew Brees. That's a whole litany of things. But I really think that this is their last chance. Their last chance under the current construction of how we have viewed the Saints, with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas and Drew Brees and, heck, the last few years, Jared Cook. I mean, a lot of things are set to change, in my opinion, by the next time they are truly a Super Bowl contender. That might be a gloomy sort of view, but I don't think, if Brees is healthy enough, I don't think there's any way he doesn't get his job back if he's healthy for week 14 or 16 or the first playoff game. I cannot see, that them keeping the keys in the guy that they paid, a couple $1 million, and it's a complete spec 1-year audition, tryout, refurbish his value, Jameis Winston. And frankly, I mean, the biggest thing I was going to have is, I wonder if how we've been seeing Taysom Hill weekly mixed in, and for those that, this whole, like, you pull a starting quarterback out and now they're back in there, and now they played a snap or two in a five snap red zone sequence, and it's like you kind of want to have your best lineup out there, right? So either they're both out there or Breeze is out there, because those are your best options. Or like that, I wonder, without Breeze and now with Jameis Winston, do we see a decent chunk more Taysom Hill? Because they're paying him plenty of money. And this would seem like the moment where, with no Drew Brees, this is their avenue. If they really, not that he's the starting quarterback, but I just mean more heavily involved. And I wonder if you're in pinches in Superflex, is going to be viable. And if he's mixed in the red zone or inside the 10-yard line a lot, and more than he has been, I wonder if this is a 4 or 5 game thing, just to make a sample size here, without Breeze, I wonder if in multiple games Taysom Hill outscores Jameis Winston. Is that super bold?
Yes. All right. Let me ask you this: are you taking like the over under on passing attempts for Taysom Hill in whatever games Breeze doesn't play, like on average? Do you say, I don't know, I'll set it at 5.5. Where do you come down on that?
Well, he's only thrown, it's like an anemic number in his career. So now, to be fair, a lot of that's with, I don't recall Bruce Bridgewater, him playing egregiously more. But I would set it lower than that. But my point is, if he's getting, let's look at it this way. You know how we talk about the Patriot running backs, or if you're a running back with Cam Newton, or Josh Allen, with the Bills, and you say that has a negative effect on the running backs. Why? Because they're going to lose a percentage of those inside the 5-yard line possibilities because of the quarterback they play with. And I just kind of wonder, Taysom Hill is sort of already their goal line, red zone kind of weapon, offensive weapon. And without Breeze, I have a hard time thinking they're going to trust Jameis Winston, captain turnover, as much as Drew Brees in those situations. And they were already pulling Drew Brees. So I don't think this is going to be like all of a sudden Taysom Hill is throwing 8 passes a game and Winston's throwing 23. And that's the 30-something attempt. Like, that's not what I mean. But what I mean is if Winston's the only real avenue he has to multiple passing touchdowns is pretty much scoring from outside the 10-yard line or outside the red zone, or he's siphoned from that capacity, and he's not a big runner. I wonder if the fantasy ceiling is a lot lower. And I'm coming from the vantage point of, I'm one of the biggest Winston guys there are out there in the dynasty space.
I think he has higher ceiling than you think. No,
the ceiling best case is there for sure. I just don't think it's going to be the reasonable middle of the road outcome.
Okay.
So you think Taysom Hill is going to play the exact same amount is what you would project?
Last year, Breeze played 11 games. Okay, so he missed 5 games, and in total last year, we had Taysom Hill throwing. He threw a total of 6 passes. So, and I think that this offense, and I think that Sean Payton, the Jameis Winston signing to the Saints was really interesting to me, especially when you look at it through the lens of Sean Payton knows what he's doing on offense, and Sean Payton had seen a lot of Jameis Winston because they were in the same division together, right? So that always was I don't play this connecting the dots all that often, right? But Sean Payton has been the couple of times in my dynasty career where I've actually made big investments on connecting the dots. Alvin Kamara to them was one of them, right? And it was because sort of a trust in him and understanding, his process and what he does. And this, to some degree, it strikes me a little bit like Brady last year, where we weren't seeing the full Brady, right? I don't think we're seeing Breeze at his best right now. This isn't Drew Brees in his prime. And you have a quarterback who I think has superior physical gifts at this point. And you have some weapons, and you sort of look, I'm looking down some of the ADAT stuff and the depth of targets for these guys. And there's not very many deep balls being thrown. And you do have some guys that can stretch the field. They're just not, because of some of the limitations Breeze has. So I do think if we're looking at this and thinking, maybe this is not maybe there's some concerns about how we're going to use Jameis. Well, I think that there's a reasonable chance that the offense, that they scheme it up so that it fits some more of his strengths. And now there's plenty of interception jokes to go around there, but I do think that that they can do some things with this offense that maybe Breeze can't do at this age of his career. So I'm not worried. Vertical game. I'm not worried about Taysom Hill. Doesn't scare me if I'm Jameis Winston. Taysom Hill wouldn't be the reason that I wouldn't play Jameis Winston. But just sort of going back to what you talked about last year. I mean, isn't it insane, or that you talked about earlier? Isn't it insane in terms of when you look look at next year, like their salary cap situation is absolutely unbelievable. And this could be like we could do like a podcast series on it, but Taysom Hill's contract number next year, his cap number, $16.1 million. I mean, how do you justify? I don't know.
Which is not starting quarterback money. Just to point that out. I mean, it starts with a 2, but it's close.
Yeah, it is
for a guy that doesn't throw passes. Correct. Yeah.
It is the 21st highest quarterback contract next year. So, I mean, that is for a guy who has thrown less than a pass a game in his career, by like not even a close. No, that's not even a close number there, right? It is a pretty remarkable. It's a pretty remarkable contract. So, I mean, when you fast forward this thing could look a lot different. I don't think, I do think if Jameis at his best, I still think Breeze is probably getting his job back. But if we're using the Teddy Bridgewater as a comparison, at Jameis Winston's best, he's much better than Teddy Bridgewater. So that would be the push-pull that I would have on that. I think it's a very low likelihood event, but I would say I think that there's much more ceiling with Winston just because I think he's a better player than Bridgewater is.
Okay. 2 games back. So we have the first, which could be viewed as a warm-up. The second one you cannot really view as much as a warm-up. And he was out for a while, Michael Thomas. And I've seen a huge range and or drop in the marketplace of some sells over the last week or two with Michael Thomas. He's still kind of getting back to, higher level snap numbers. Even when he, was out in week 1, he played more snaps than he played this past week. And so he's been really not impactful in 2 games since he's returned. How do you see like the confidence? Now you got a quarterback change, and Thomas has been a high volume guy, hasn't really been a deep threat, hasn't been an overt win you over and like he's a touchdown per game type of guy either. He has been one of the best hands guys, one of the best, 15 yards and in receivers in recent years. Do you think, is this, you always kind of go either way in the marketplace. Your options are either, well, this could be like Mike Evans, for example, or Juju Smith-Schuster a few weeks ago. Like you have these moments in time with players where you say, there's a lot to like. And obviously with Michael Thomas, he's an historic player. If you look at what he's done in aggregate and what he's done in recent years up till this year, that you either say, well, I'm getting a heavy, heavy historical discount, or you have to ask yourself, is something changing? And obviously we have quarterback things changing. He just got back after an absence. So this could be a rest of season. So answer that part. Like, are we going to look back in a month and it's like, remember that slow, sluggish, transitional back to starterhood Michael Thomas? Or is it going to be like, I mean, he finished the year generally as a dud from what we are accustomed to. And then how do you think life looks for Michael Thomas beyond 2020?
Well, I'll take the second part first. I think that there's, if you are playing Dynasty and the wide receiver 1, consensus wide receiver 1 entering the season gets hurt, right? And all of a sudden his price drops. Doesn't that ring alarm bells, right? Why do we have this player up here so high and all of a sudden he gets hurt and is sort of working his way back in, and now we're dropping him, 2 rounds in startup draft valuation? That doesn't make much sense to me. That and putting guys who have 8-9 game career sample sizes ahead of him. I mean, that seems quizzical to me, considering one guy's on a Hall of Fame track and the other guy we have seen for less than 3 months, right? So that would sort of be my take on him. I think if people are bailing on him, I mean, it seems right. You take guys on Hall of Fame tracks that are at discounts, right? Like that's historically a really winning proposition. And so if you just keep doing that, I mean, is it possible that something more is wrong with Michael Thomas? Sure. Is it possible that somehow this situation, really tanks his value? I guess it's possible. But what's the most likely outcome? that he's probably going to continue on, close to, if not on the same Hall of Fame track that we've seen him so far in his career. I mean, this is the wide receiver one entering the season, right? And I don't think there was any debate about that. And so I think that if there's any opportunity to buy him, that's going to probably extend in off-season drafts. Honestly,
unless he comes all the way back around and he's producing like a top 5 guy for rest of season, there is going to be a mark because he's the type, right? I mean, this is
going to be wild.
But this is the age range that people get edgy, right? It's the 27 into your 28-year-old off season, and especially now you've got a bunch of shiny toys, that are 21 to 24. And this is the reason. I think we talked about this, back before the season starts. It's a real interesting time for dynasty wide receivers because you have the old guard, which is 3, 4, 5 guys that have produced very well. Devontae Adams is one of them. He's producing well. You've got DeAndre Hopkins. You better cover him with 4 guys. And Michael Thomas, now that he's working through this. And so you get all these guys that you're starting to get that age discount into the equation. And with Michael Thomas, now you're getting he didn't give me 20 points in his first game back. And so he's had 3 non-games this year, 3 games that haven't really helped you at all. And so that, and then if people are looking around, going, Breeze is hurt now. And, is Breeze going to be around next year? And just a number of things. But you also, I think a big part of that is just the age and you have the rookie class and young wide receivers in general doing well. But there's a big difference between doing well, like you're saying, and all you're putting together. What is Thomas? Is he 4 elite wide receiver 1 seasons in? I think the number's 4.
So. Yeah.
Something like that. And again, he's basically like Hall of Fame careers. He's what, like 60% through his career? Like, doesn't he look like you could see him at 34, like sort of playing like Larry Fitzgerald in terms of the separation's not as, much as it was 5-8 years ago, but he's still there converting. And I know Fitzgerald is basically unusable this year, but even last year, Fitzgerald was a viable guy for lineups. And that was 6-7 seasons beyond where we are now with Michael Thomas. I don't know. He's been getting by without elite measurables and, being able to run away from guys on deep routes, etc., for his whole career, pretty much since high school, maybe. I mean, so that's the type that ages gracefully into their 30s. And I don't know, this maybe be aging myself, but I've gotten a lot more, let's call it tolerant and open to historic players when they get to ages that 5 years ago as a dynasty GM, I would have run firmly away from. It seems like Thomas owners, and we're seeing Hopkins, kind of shred a little bit in his valuation. We've already seen Odell Beckham fall through the floor. So that ship has sailed going into the offseason. That is locked in, and he's injured as well. So he might be the ultimate standard. I mean, we joke, what did we say? Like he might go round 10 of startup drafts. I mean, I just throw things out, but that to me is not attention grabbing. That to me is it absolutely could happen. So,
but which person did you say? I didn't hear.
Oh, Odell Beckham was the one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, fall through the floor when you say the first 4 or 5 years of his career. I mean, who can touch him? So Thomas is pretty much on that track of historic player. And I was just to put a fine point on it. Yeah, 4 straight seasons in the top 8. Of adjusted points per game. I do a little bit of games played stuff in there, but top 8 4 straight seasons, and now here we are, year 5, and we have 3 games of non-usability, and like you said, that is going to cause multi-round drops of the trade market, maybe even more. I've seen him traded for the best thing in the deal is a future first.
That is insane,
and not 2021 Jordan, and not Superflex. I'll keep going with this. I mean, Galladay and OJ Howard, like, where are we going with this? I've also seen some where they're pivoting to other elite players, but where's I understand if you want to say from an insulation standpoint, okay, I have a high and meaning like a top 3 or 4 pick in 2021, and I don't want to trade that for Michael Thomas. I can understand some of the logic there. But what I can't do is when you're trading a player as the best part of the deal and like a late first or not even a first or multiple players. I saw something with, Michael Pittman, Debo Samuel, and a first in 2022. Like, what are we like the odds that either of those guys ever do anything approaching one Michael Thomas season?
Right.
Is like what, 6%?
Right.
I don't know. It's like
I do think that's a great, and I want to finish on Michael Thomas for a second, but I think that point is fantastic, right? Is a way to think about trades, right? When you get into these situations, and just think about this, right? If Michael Thomas produces X next year, right? Like, and if that's a top 12 finish, right? And I think he's got plenty of upside on that, but just use that, right? What's the odds in the rest of their career, right? That random future first is going to do that, right? Once Thomas does that, right, he's banked that. The odds that pick outproduces Michael Thomas are very low, right? I mean, they're very, very low. And so you have to think about that, right? And I think that, those Debo Samuel things, right? What's the odds that either of those guys can approach, right, that even the Michael Thomas volume, let alone, right, the greatness that he is as a player?
Well, the auto start status, I always use auto start as the, when you're a good dynasty team, what are you looking for? More or better auto start players, right? Because you're already kind of good. You're a good team. And so what really moves the needle for you? A guy that it makes you clicking the boxes of your lineup every single week easier. Guys like, how many years now? You just click the button. Julio Jones. I mean, sometimes you have some injury concerns, correct? But 4 years straight, Michael Thomas, boom, just click the button, right? Is he on bye or not? Just click the button. And I think a lot of times, and to me, that is the definition of dynasty getting cute, right? So you're trying to get out you're trying to prevent the falling knife scenario. And I've talked about this before, whether it's a player of elite status that is not worth elite anymore, or you're worried won't be worth elite, so you're getting out now, or a player that's producing, and we talk about this with flip players, right? Or running backs that now have a job, but they have a job for 4 weeks, rest of the season, whatever it is. So that's a different conversation because you know what? They haven't really done it before. They're probably not going to do it next year. There's lots of reasons why this is the best. This is the glorious day in the meadow. It's sunny. You're taking beautiful pictures, and you're having a picnic. Like it's glorious, but it's all going to end. It's going to start raining and ants are going to get in the picnic basket, and it's happening in a month. Like you sort of have a timetable for some of these other more glaring flip players. But when you're talking about a strong profiled player, and again, at this, what you consider a critical moment, age 27, or this running back is like Ezekiel Elliott, 25. Dare I say it out loud, right? A 25-year-old historically drafted and productive running back that the wheels are going to fall off immediately. And like you said, even if you want to just go heads up, Michael Thomas versus whatever you're buying with him next year. Here we go. Heads up. Let's hit it. Or Ezekiel Elliott versus however cute you're getting selling for this pick or this running back or whatever. And you're turning back the clock by 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. That just go heads up 2021. You tell me who has better chances and what is most likely to happen. So, and I think Michael Thomas, you're trying to sell. Be careful. Be careful what you're asking for. So you're getting ahead of the market. And a lot of times, like that's what I'm seeing. You're selling for these younger players, but or picks. And I love picks. Almost, I would venture. I mean, as much as any rookie loving dynasty GM out there, like find one that loves them more than I do. It's hard. And I'm arguing against the picks.
Right.
So, because I also love profiles and I also love players that are productive, and you kind of don't have to worry about them on if they're good, because there's plenty of guys you think are good. They get to the NFL and they're not good. So that's the risk of any player. I mean, isn't there half the conversation on Twitter about, is Jonathan Taylor good right now?
Right.
And plenty of people thought he was great. And some of those same people are like, I'm really, really worried. We're half a season in. So that is you love the guy and you're half a season in and you have lots of concerns about, is he good? a cross section. And now you have Michael Thomas, who's done it for 4 straight years. And I guess now you're wondering if he's good.
Right. Yeah.
Just to say that just sounds funny, because that's where some of these trades, that's where they're coming from, right? Is it fear-based? I'm trying to just distill this down for folks, because to me, it's a macro thing, not just about Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I actually think that this year might be playing some of this, and that there's not as much going on, so people have more time, right?
And weekly machinations and swells and drops.
Right. We've seen, more startup drafts, for example, right? We just know that some of the Dynasty folks in particular are spending more time doing this. And so maybe that's it, right? Maybe it's just people are overreacting this year because it's more, there's just more focus on it. I think that could be one thing. I don't know. I do think that anytime, the more, this is probably a conversation. Again, we could do a mini series. I think that if you are, and I think that some people do this, and I think it's how disasters happen, which is try and predict or get ahead of market value moves. And when you are playing, trying to, I don't want to lose startup value on Michael Thomas over the next 6, 8, 12, 18 months.
Are you in the future startup draft market? I thought it sounds like this is an existing league, Jordan. It's interesting.
Well, people are trying to not lose, quote, value, right? And value only matters if you're looking to sell.
If you're buying or selling, right?
If you're buying or selling, right? I don't, I bought my house 3 years ago, and quite frankly, I don't know what the price of it is because I haven't tried to sell it yet, right?
You're living there, right?
Right.
You needed a place
and I'm using it every day, right?
Every day you're using it. You're actually using it more frequently than the one pair of socks you really like.
So, and that's the thing, right? And I talk about this example of like Julio Jones, right? It doesn't matter if Julio Jones's market perception falls, if you're not going to sell him, right? If you're not going to try and trade him, who cares, right? That's actually the time to buy him, right? And so I do think that there's a mistake that people make, which is trying to, I don't want to lose market value, right? The market, again, we could do a mini series on this, but suffice it to say that I think the market behaves totally irrationally. And so once you try and get on the right side of that, or try and predict where ADP is going to be, or these sorts of things, you're playing an absolutely an irrational and losing game. And I came up with a parallel.
I came up with a parallel, Jordan.
Okay.
This is, in real life and non-football terms, this is living your life for other people. What we're talking about, so this is you get the new car, you wear the great clothes, this is suddenly the popular song. I'm going to like it and I'm going to play it, in my headphones and at my desk at work. Or this is, everyone's playing. Here's one I had in my previous workplace scenario was, and this is, smartphones were out, but they obviously weren't as prominent as they are today. But people that had iPhones back then, so you had apps, you had games, but it was always like what's now the trendy game? I can't even remember half of them, but it would be 1 month people would be playing such and such and talking about whatever. And then 3, 4, 5 weeks later, it was whatever the fad was. And you needed to get ahead of it. Like, you can't keep playing that game from October when it's December, right? Because now you're going to be stuck in the mud. And I would imagine, if you're growing up, and a teenager or kid these days, it's probably, and maybe in the 90s when I was growing up, or it just wasn't as prominent, or I don't remember. But it's you're kind of living to either impress other people. Like you said, hey, I have a house, I'm living in it. Or if you view it as like, well, I have a car because I drive it and it gets me places. Or, I wear these clothes because they're comfortable and they fit my lifestyle. But I'm not trying to, I want to make sure other people respect me because what I wear, or they think higher of me. So I'm trying to, or you wear what's in season, right? You wear what's popular and trendy now. And I think that's sort of what we're talking about with player value, is you're trying to please the startup draft overlords. You're trying to please. It's kind of pretty roster syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Because and it's like you can have part of your roster that's pretty, right? I mean, and we're not saying that like DK Metcalf can't help you win a title this year, or I mean, there's plenty of players, but when you're shifting players that they can just get work done, right? Like you can have a pair of work boots that you're not going to wear to a dress up work function or a wedding. But man, you go out and start hauling wood, or you start mucking through your backyard in the snow and the ice, and you want the work boots. You don't want the, the Gucci whatever. So that's what I think it is. You can have trendy, hot players, if you will, but you know what? That changes all the time. But you need to set your lineup as well, and it's okay if you have Michael Thomas. And I'm trying to think of, obviously, Julio Jones is a great example. That what's an older running Todd Gurley, for example. Talk about an ugly guy, right? But if you started him the past 4-6 weeks, he's been a positive contributor to your contending team. And so I think a mix of that is appropriate. Now, you don't have a lot of liquidity, maybe, if your entire roster is that way. But to say as a contender, you can't, or even a team that's out of it this year, saying you have to trade Michael Thomas or you have to trade falling knife Julio Jones before the offseason or you're screwed. And you're looking ahead, right? Julio Jones can't help you win next year, or you gotta turn that into 112 in your rookie draft for sure. Like that's an auto. Like you'd be lucky if someone takes that. So I just think a good macro kind of recap of what we've been talking about in a few different avenues here is just that you don't want to make your roster to please somebody else. You've got to set a lineup, and you need players that are producing now if you want to win. And yes, you need to also think about the future via having picks or getting picks or having developing players on your taxi squad or your bench or even in your lineup that still have untapped upside. But that doesn't mean you have to run away from players because they're going to lose market value. Because like you said, that means you're involved with the market in an existing league. And the only real ways are the waiver wire, the annual draft, which doesn't include notable veterans a lot of times. I know Gronkowski was in some, of note this offseason, but in general, there's not relevant players in there. And then it's in the in the trade market. And you don't have to make 20 trades a year in your league to be a good dynasty franchise, is what I would say.
Yeah. And especially if you're better off making none if you're trying to keep up with market value. It's just I'd say it's fickle, and it's really, I did some of these polls in the off season, right? Compare, who would you rather have, this player or that player? And I'm just going to rehash them in January.
Retweet them and put a new poll right on top.
Yep. Just as a mental, just as an academic exercise, and just see, right? And these things just changes
by week 4.
Yeah, and there's so much, and it's funny because we were, I was preparing and you should go check it out. I made a really bold call in the Dynasty Movers article this week, which is something I almost never do. I said something pretty bold about that, so you should go check that out.
You want to give us a teaser on the position?
Quarterback.
All right. I'm interested. I'm listening. I'm interested.
Yes. Quarterback and Superflex. And as I was thinking about it, and I tweeted this last night, I said, it feels like at this time of the year that ranking should be pretty static, right? Because we sort of have an idea of the guys who maybe started slow, or guys that maybe we thought were going to have a job that didn't, or vice versa, guys we didn't think were going to have a job but do. And then we sort of have an idea on the range of outcomes that guys are playing, right? And, what's the difference between 6 games and 8 games or 10 games, right? I mean, it's a decent sample size. I guess a half a season's a decent sample size, but I don't think it's anything that we should be. Once we sort of get there, I don't think a 1 or 2 week blip should change us all that much, right? And so I do think, and you'll see people or folks talk about, well, I need to update my rankings, change my rankings, or I'm doing my week, my where you'll see the tweets, right, about the new rankings. And I think that Dynasty value probably should move less than it does, and it's treated right. And so I think the more you're moving it, right, it's okay to react to new information, but I think you have to be really careful about overreacting to limited information.
And especially the higher up you are on rankings, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's okay between wide receiver 60 and 100, to have some pretty big liquidity there, especially at running back too, right? I mean, because if you have a backup running back, you're outside the top, 30, 40, 50, whatever.
Listening.
And yeah, so I'm familiar with that range of the rankings and tiers so, I mean, having a running back that is going to see a month of starts that's more than almost everybody in that range would get in their career, right? So they have this perfect storm. They're the primary backup. They're right there, and they get the injury. So they're usable when the rest of their career, regardless of their market value, may not be usable. So that is, when you get down, and same thing could work with a backup tight ends that, is a spot starter for the rest of this year or whatever. So those types of things, I think there are some pretty wild opportunity differences that this is all we got. Now, what are we dealing with though? We're dealing with guys that, if you're operating on like a 1 to 100 value system, they might be moving from, a 1 or a 0.5 or whatever to like a 3, or like, so, but that might be the difference between running back 90 and running back 56 or 48 or whatever it is. So, but that is a huge change. Now we need tiers in there and, more descriptive ways to show player value and tier drops, etc. But that would be the lone thing. Guys that actually are situationally valued, now you need to make sure you're valuing them situationally. But when you get high up, it's not so much about situation. And that's kind of what, a good summary of what we've been talking about with Michael Thomas as well, that you're buying the player. And if you're worried that the rest of the season or the quarterback change or next year, and if there's cap casualties and all this, Saints are a different. Yeah, Saints are a different team. I mean, wouldn't you actually say if they're a stripped down team and they're not quite as good as a team, couldn't that be actually good news for volume and quarterback? And more negative game script and all those kind of things. So we saw that with the Dallas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dallas, you saw uber volume because defense not very good, team overall, plenty of questions. Yeah, but at least they drafted a wide receiver in the first round.
Yeah, right. And signed a running back instead of a corner, so they got it covered. I will say, just to close out the Michael Thomas thing, because I think we should spend, when there's big market changers, like it's prudent to spend the time. And do you want to guess what his difference between with Breeze and without Breeze has been in his career? So he's played 60 games with Breeze, and he's played
how many without? Six without. So 5 with Teddy Bridgewater and 1 with, who was it? It wasn't Chase Daniel, was it?
Maybe it was.
It won't say on there, but I know Chase Daniel, he's sparingly played, but he was on the Saints one year. Anyway, that would be a good pull. But so I'm gonna say it's probably not very much, because he was right in his heyday with 5 of the 6 games known with Bridgewater last year. So I'm gonna guess it's a difference of 1 point per game.
In which direction?
Oh, there you go. That makes it sound like I was going to game.
It's 2 points per game, and it's higher.
Oh, there it is. There's
it's 2 points per game, and it's so in Breeze's games, 18.5. Out of Breeze's games, 20.5. And I'll say it's up, and it's actually not targets. It's less than a tenth of a target difference.
It's efficiency.
He's up 13 yards. Again, same amount of opportunities, up 13 yards per game. Wow. Again, it's a small sample, but up over a half a catch a game. And it's about the same in touchdowns. So, without, again, small sample caveats, I would just say if people are concerned about
6 games is a decent, it's not like it's 2 games, at least it's 6. Yeah.
Right. It's a tenth of what we had with Breeze, but the,
wow.
It's a 1,547 yard pace.
I dare you to put up on Twitter that no Drew Brees is sneaky good news for Michael Thomas.
And then duck, right? And just sign off.
Yeah, and say, but what I mean is he goes from unstartable to startable. because he's unstartable currently. If Brees played the rest of the season, he's unstartable.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any other trade thoughts as we close up? And again, next time we're on the airwaves for folks next week, some will have already gone past their trade deadline. So this is really the critical few days for a cross section of leagues.
Yeah, just send out offers. I mean, get some coffee, some Red Bull, and get to work. And I mean, it is important to. I wouldn't be caught, right. Don't get crazy in terms of, hey, I need to make a drastic change to my team to push for a playoff spot so I can compete for a championship. Right, that's not really the arc that you want to be on. Right, but there might only be a week where you can buy Michael Thomas low. Right, there might only be. Well, it's probably a little bit longer for Zeke, but it might not be that long, right? So, I mean, these opportunities, the next time you're able to trade might not be there. So that would be one thing that I would really look to do. And if you're not contending, pick upgrades, right? Third to seconds where you can get them, those will help you. And I mean, probably my best. And I've done some, and we've talked trade journals and stuff like that. Maybe that'll be an interesting topic over the off season. But one thing I've noticed a lot about myself is that I am very good in rookie drafts trading, right? That's where I can make a lot of value moving around the board in rookie drafts. So having those bullets to fire, getting rid of some of that, the in situations where they're not helping me, the backup running backs, the Wayne Gallman types, flipping them for upgrades. So I have the extra ammunition to fire in a couple months when I need it. Right. That's very helpful.
Yeah. And that's a great point because you get into your rookie draft and people generally want picks and you really got to pay premiums and find the right combo of that team you're trading with and the player for them to be interested in the player. So to assume that, I could get a second, but I'm not going to take a third. Well, that third is going to be probably more liquid than that player that is in that value range once you get to your pick, or trying to trade 2/3 into the second round as opposed to a third and a player. Good luck. Good luck when you get, to your rookie draft season and picks starting to go because it can be very difficult. And again, we'll be talking about that in the off season. But what I would say, and the one thing to reiterate that you said is when you have, again, I am swamped this week, but there are leagues I know Thursday night kickoff. Trading is over. So you're gonna have next week, the week after, and you're gonna look at your roster or look at situations in your league and be like, I didn't even send that type of offer to that team, that I wanted to try to buy that player. I wanted to sell this player. And so you've got, again, weeks/months before, of time that, if that means, figuring out a few extra minutes and at least look at through these scenarios of I'm not contending. Let me look at the contenders. I am contending. Let me look at the non-contenders. Let me look at some of the Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, some of these specific players that I think could be, kind of ugly profiles right now. And this could be the window. I mean, I don't think Juju Smith-Schuster is going for the discount now as he was 4 to 6 weeks ago. So all these scenarios can be very short-lived. And I would just say, figure out a way once the deadline is closed, there will be a point in time after, if you ignored it, of saying, man, I wish I had gone the extra mile. So this is the week, or if it's week 12, 13, whenever your deadline is, go the extra mile because in-season trading is the most volatile. And there's really the biggest difference from league to league, team to team, based on their situations. You get to January, February, and especially later in the offseason, there's a lot more groupthink and a lot more consensus going on, which can make it more difficult, to be fair, to make deals because there's less range of outcomes from the asking or selling price overall. All right. Reminder to subscribe, rate, and review the Football Guys Dynasty shows through your various listening apps. You can sign up for the Football Guys daily email update at footballguys.com/free. Delivered all the news you want on a daily basis. Must know information to close the fantasy season here in 2020 because every day something's happening. And I'll just say, quarterback news this week, fascinating. Beyond Drew Brees, there could be 3, 4, 5 potential spot start or injury out relevant starters. or there could be zero. Well, not zero. Bruce is out. So it could be one. There could be one. There could be a handful. But again, you want to be up on the news. Even if you're checking throughout the day, get that data point into your inbox. And that's at footballguys.com/free. So in this episode, we talked about Michael Thomas. We talked about the Saints situation, which is fascinating, and a lot of macro mindset discussion on your dynasty trading and team composition. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.